Hey there, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. My name is Daniel Trenum, and I will be your host as always. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to let you know of a few things of note. First, you may or may not be aware that I host another podcast called The Third Seat. The Third Seat is unrelated to the podcast you are listening to right now, but if you'd like to check it out, then I will put a link in the description of today's episode that you can use to listen to it. If you like this podcast, then I really think you will like The Third Seat as well, so I highly recommend you check it out. Next, I want to let you know of a few ways you can support the podcast. First, be sure to tell a friend if you enjoy the show. Word of mouth is not only a great way to help support the show, but it's also zero cost. Secondly, if you enjoyed today's episode, then be sure to leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Leaving a positive review is one of the best ways of not only supporting the show, but it also gives me direct feedback from you regarding how you feel about the show overall. I greatly appreciate if you decide to take the time to support the show in any of these ways. Finally, if you'd like to follow me or the show on social media, then feel free to check out the description of today's episode. Here you will find all affiliated and mentioned links, as well as how you can support the show online. As always, I want to thank you for tuning into and supporting the show. It really means a lot to me, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed making it for you. All right, everyone, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to another episode of the podcast. My name is Daniel Trenum. I will be your host for today's episode, and I'm very excited that you have decided to tune in to another episode of the podcast. My guest today is someone that I have been looking forward to talking to for a while. I first came into contact with them and just found out about them and what they do maybe over a year ago, I would say. The time is getting blurry at this point, but yeah, they are a local record store owner here in town, here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they do a lot of work in the music industry here in Chattanooga, and I'm very excited to talk to them today and see what they have to say. So, Ben, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, for those that don't know, you are the owner of Yellow Racket Records here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But for those that don't know a little bit about what you do and exactly what goes on within the walls of the record store, just share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and just some background on what you do.
Yeah, so I started an independent record label, I guess about 4 years ago, 2018, called Yellow Racket. I was working on a record with my band at the time, producing it, and we started talking about whether we were going to shop it out to a label or whether we wanted to release it ourselves. And there were just a lot of cool stories out there about artists who had started their own labels because of the artistic freedom and the ability to make business decisions, on your own about how you wanted to handle a release. So I just said, well, maybe we'll just start our own label. So we started Yellow Racket and put out our album, and then started signing other artists over the following couple of years. And then I kind of had this vision that maybe like 10 years down the road, the label might be successful enough that we could open a record store. And, I had all these other sort of grand plans for things that we could do down the road. And a friend of mine was like, why not just do that now? Yeah. Right. So I put, when was this would have been in like 2019. So I started putting together a business plan in like the spring of that year, I want to say, and marching forward with this idea of trying to get a record store open here in Chattanooga under the same name. Mm-hmm. And so we made some progress. We were able to borrow a little money from friends and family and former coworkers and things like that, and signed a lease on a building in February of 2020. Took occupancy March. The first week of March, and then everything shut down a week later.
So I knew it was around the pandemic, like when everything was happening. Yeah. I wasn't sure exactly when it was, but what was that like for you? Just that beginning time when everything shut down. Like this was, it wasn't your first time working in the music industry, but like this was a new venture for you. And I'm assuming, is it just you that owns it, or do you have business partners?
Yeah, it's just me so far. Yeah.
So what was that experience like? And now that you're 2 years removed from it.
At the time, it was sort of like, whoa, this is crazy. Like I remember as a kid when SARS happened and these other pandemics, but they never really came home to roost. Mm-hmm. And so I think for a while it was just sort of like, well, this will blow over, and so let's just keep moving forward. Yeah. And just no idea that it was going to be a whole 2 year long uphill battle. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean that was just completely wild. It was definitely, sometime between like the fall of 2020 and the fall of 2021, I would say like those 12 months were probably the hardest of my life, for so many different reasons, like personal, professional, just all these different things. And probably that was true for a lot of people, right? Just because, I mean, it was an incredibly hard time for everybody. But it was extremely hard trying to start a new business. And a lot of people thought like, this dude's crazy. Why? And in some ways that sort of worked to our advantage because, we had like, news stations like, being like, what is up with this crazy record store that's trying to open in the middle of the worst pandemic in the last century, since like the Spanish flu of the early 1900s. So, it was, in some ways, I think it kind of worked to our favor because it was like totally crazy. But it wasn't like, I think from the outside, it probably looked like, because we didn't end up opening our doors officially until like August of that year. So from the outside, it probably looked like, that just like I was absolutely nuts that I was like trying to open a business like 6 months in. And it was like, sorry, like I signed a 3-year lease like a month before this all started. So like, I'm on the hook,
Well,
like
it's not like you could have known. It's not like you were
right.
Like, oh, yes,
But it wasn't like I made the decision to open a record store like 2 months after COVID started. It was like we were locked in. We had financial obligations, and it was like it's either like we do this or we like declare bank. And I had like I had like people that had been consulting with me and even, some of the folks who lent me money were like, don't worry about it. Like, just like pull the plug. Nobody's going to hold it against you. Nobody could have foreseen this. But I guess I was like too stubborn to do that. I didn't want to like forfeit on all those loans and all that kind of stuff. So I just...
Well, it was like your child at that point,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously no one could have known that it was going to happen when it happened and also turned into what it turned into. Because I mean, I distinctly remember for me, that whole, like the beginning of when everything shut down in like, I guess it was March or April of 2020, that was for me was like one of the first moments in my life where you ever heard people say like, oh, you'll remember where you were when this happened,
Yeah.
Because, that was one of the first moments in my life that I remember because at the time I was in the Dominican Republic and I was on a mission trip down there and we had like no service, nothing, like where we were, there was very remote. And then out of nowhere it was like a Thursday night, out of nowhere we got just a flash of service somehow. And like just texts and calls were flooding in and like all these news notifications was like this organization is shutting down and this organization is shutting down and this person got sick and this person got sick. And I was like, whoa, this is turned up really quickly, and so, and then like UTC went on a 2-week break initially is what they said. And then like a couple days into it, they're like, we're going virtual the rest of the year. Like
and then you had to figure out how to get home, right?
And so we were like, okay, we're supposed to leave in 3 days. I think we're still on track to get out here. It was a very strange experience. And then getting back, it's like no one really knew what to do, like that was one of the few moments in my life. I mean, I've talked to people about this where it's like, usually I think in most situations, like if it's a negative situation like that, there's usually someone that at least seems like they know what they're doing, or they at least seem like, hey, in most situations, this is what we should do. But it was like, even, the professionals at like UTC, like the administrators and like government officials, everybody was just like, I don't know, like your guess is as good as mine here. I don't know. And so it was just so strange, like being in an environment like that. And it was very, like, looking back now, it feels like it was yesterday. I mean, there's always some debate, like, when do we officially say we're done with the pandemic and when are we still in it, whatever. But I think for all intents and purposes, like at this point in time, people are a lot more, cool about it at this point, especially than we were at the beginning of it back in spring of 2020. And so at that time, it was just like, no one really knew what to do and how to go forward about it. It was just very strange. And so it was such a weird time, and it feels like it was just yesterday, but also it feels like it was like an eternity ago. It was a very weird time. So
I feel like that, yeah, as time passes on, like the older I get, the more I realize just how much everybody's sort of winging it. You know, like when you're younger, you sort of think like, oh, like these experts that I'm watching on TV or these people who like are CEOs of this company, they totally like they're so smart. They know their subject matter like inside out. And then having worked in the corporate environment and like, you know, just so many different contexts, where you suddenly realize like, oh, everybody's kind of like making it up as they go a little bit. Yeah. You know? Like there's a little expertise, but there's also just a lot of like improvising and like,
the first time I realized
answers.
the first time I realized that was when I became, I think it was like senior year of high school into college. And not that I expected to be an expert of anything when I was in college, but like, I remember being in middle school and think like I'd see the kids that were in college and high school at that time, and I was like, wow, like they're so cool. They seem to know like they're so good at all these things. Like they can do everything, you know. And I was like, if I could just be a college student, I'll be you know up where they're at. I'll just know everything and have the world at my fingertips. Yeah. And I remember you know like I went from senior year in high school and freshman year in college, and I was like, I'm still just kind of like out here just doing whatever I do, you know, like I'm just like, I don't really know exactly what's going on, but I'm just kind of making, you know, not entirely making it up as I go along, but there's a degree of like winging it, you know, like you said. And even so, like, not that everything I do and everything that people around me do is just like, I don't know, like it's not like we're all winging it all the time, but there is a degree of it, I think, in everybody's life where it's like, we're going to roll the dice on this and just see, you know, see kind of what happens.
I mean, I encountered that a lot in starting this business, you know, where, you know, I'd meet with people, you know, whether it was like, you know, like meet with somebody from an accounting firm or meet with somebody from a marketing firm, meet with somebody from, you know, like an incubator or whatever, and ask these questions. And there was just so much like hemming and hawing and be like, well, there's no one right way to do it. But then, you know, or like, oh, you don't need to worry about this right now. You can like just sort of kick that can down the road. And then you go talk to somebody else for whom like that can was their specialty. And they'd be like, no, this is the most important thing, you know? And so like there wasn't anybody saying like, this is the right way to do this and this is the wrong way to do this. Everybody was just kind of, you know, there was just so much. It was so spongy, you know? And even like, you know, when you develop a business plan, you know, I worked for 5 years in sales and marketing inside a logistics company where I was doing proposal management. And I'm working with these teams to develop like a pro forma, you know, like a working business model based on the data that we're getting from these giant corporations who want our company to run their warehouses. And so we're constantly going through and like tweaking the data and, you know, creating all these like, you know, hypothetical scenarios essentially based on the data. And at every single time, you know, like the business would start and was like, yeah, the data was wrong, or like this assumption was wrong. And now like the business isn't profitable and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just like more like confirmation that like nobody knew what they were doing. Everybody's data was wrong or skewed or like just not cleaned it, you know. And so then I'm like designing a pro forma for my business, you know, like what are we going to do in the next 3 to 5 years? And, you know, people would want to like deep dive on this like really specific issue. And it was so hard not to be like, why are we getting down in the weeds on this when this is never going to happen? Like I've had enough experience in the corporate world to know that like the pro forma is always wrong, always. And like COVID turned out to be like the, you know, just the pinnacle example of like how the pro forma can be completely wrong. You know?
Well, I saw something the other day. I mean, obviously COVID created a lot of issues and it threw a lot of hurdles in all of our lives in ways that we had never experienced before. But on a somewhat different note, I think it also highlighted a lot of problems that were existing that we weren't aware of or weren't, you know, giving the proper attention to prior. Like a great example is, and I mean, I'm no expert in this, so, you know, I'm definitely willing to be corrected if I'm totally wrong, but like a big topic was the whole issue with the supply chain, and it still is to a degree, like you know, just the global and domestic supply chain of things getting clogged at ports, and you know, shelves being empty in different ways, and from people I've talked to, it wasn't that prior the supply chain was perfect and like COVID just like destroyed it. It was more that prior it was like it was just on the edge of
Right.
being a success or being a failure, and COVID kind of highlighted that, and we saw that it only takes one wrench to be thrown into the machine for things to kind of fall out of control. And I could see that now. I was like, I get that. It wasn't that it was necessarily COVID broke the supply chain. It was more that it wasn't entirely perfect prior, and then that highlighted the issues and problems that it had.
Yeah, there were like cracks in the frame already.
Yeah. And so I think that's an interesting way to look at it, because in a way, to me that says, and I mean, it's across the board, it's not always the same, but if something is an issue like that, in a way, it gives me a little bit of hope, because it's like, okay, it's not that this entity or this system is entirely broken beyond repair. It's just that it needs repairs, and I don't know, being a little generic or kind of abstract when I say that, but if you think about the supply chain, like a big issue was that a lot of the things we had, we weren't able to produce here. Like we had to import it in other areas of the world.
Right.
And so getting that in all at the same time was an issue, and just a lot of different moving parts all at once.
Yeah.
And so now that we know that, it's like, okay, we see the problem more clearly now. We can probably adequately, or we should be in a better position to more adequately address this issue,
Well, there were probably decision makers at some point, it's like, okay, we're sort of planning for like, where can the system fail, right? And this idea of like, a global pandemic that shuts down the world for more than a year. They're like, oh, that's not going to happen. Well, like we don't need to prepare for that, right? And then so suddenly it's like, oh, there can be real consequences to these decisions that we've made, that we don't have enough like near proximity manufacturing or something like very close proximity. And I mean, another great example is like the driver shortage, and we were reporting on that. I would put together monthly or like quarterly business reports when I was in my role in logistics, and we were reporting about the driver shortage for like 3-4 years. It's like, this is a huge problem. We're 40,000 drivers short of what we need, and then all of a sudden, it's like
boom, okay, now nobody can work out on the road.
Exactly.
So it's interesting to see now that we're roughly 2 years removed from, or a little over 2 years removed from when everything kind of shut down, at least globally speaking, like looking back and reflecting on how things have been and just where we're at now. But now that you specifically are, you're 2 years, over 2 years, I guess, technically.
Almost 2 years.
Well, I guess 2 years from March, but you said you opened your doors in.
Yeah, so we opened our doors in August. So our official, like, we're going to celebrate our 2-year anniversary at the end of this month.
So you're almost, so today is, at the recording of this, it's August 6th. How are you feeling now that you're coming up on the 2-year mark, and just looking back over how the first 2 years have been, and what do you think the future of what you're doing right now, what do you think that looks like, or what do you hope it looks like?
Man, that's a big question. There's so many moving parts, so our original plan when we were, in that pro forma that I talked about, we were, we designed the business to incorporate like coffee and, basically anything that goes along with a coffee shop. So you're talking about like beverage sales and potentially food sales and, that kind of thing. And then we were also planning to do live music and listening parties and things like that, so that we weren't just relying on the retail, like record sales piece of it. Because, I've been a fan of records for a long time, but I was still like, that might be a little risky. Maybe we need to have, in these days too, I'm going all over the place here, but these days, if you want to have brick and mortar retail, you gotta have something that makes it a really unique experience, and have a reason that people might want to go to your store instead of just like buying it on Amazon and never going out.
Also, too, like, I'm a firm believer that if what you did, if the only thing you did at Yellow Racket is you just sold records, nothing else, that would attract a certain amount of people. That would attract people like me that want to buy records. Like people that are interested in that. But that only goes so far, and especially here in Chattanooga, where it's not like the biggest music scene in the world.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So whereas if you sell records, but along with that, you have a little coffee shop section.
Yeah.
I know at one time, and it may still be the case, you had like there was like a tattoo parlor in there.
Yeah, and Danny's still in there doing tattoos.
Yeah, and so you offer different, like the crux of it is the music that you sell, like the records and turntables and things like that. But there's other things that can draw more crowds into it in a more diversified audience.
Yeah, and just like increase your traffic, hopefully. You know what I mean? So, hopefully all of those, businesses and all of those plans are sort of bolstering each other. So somebody may be like, oh, I'm going to go buy a cup of coffee and get some work done. And then they see a Nirvana record on the shelf and they're like, well, I have to get that today, right? It's all those things. So that was our original plan. And we signed a lease with that in mind, 2,500 square foot space. And then all of a sudden, it was like laughable trying to get, any kind of money or funding for food and beverage or live music. Like everybody's like, no, you should quit.
We're gonna have live music in here. Oh, wait a minute, no one can go in
right.
there.
Yeah. And meanwhile, like venues are shutting down, they're closing their doors all over the country, and like coffee shops are going out of business, and so it was just like absurd. So that is still our plan in the near future. And I'm hoping that will relieve some of the pressure. I mean, those poor records, they have been champs over the last 2 years because we've sold a lot of records. I think, I haven't looked at the number recently, but just in the first year and change, so basically at the beginning of this year, we had sold 17,000 records.
Like individual records?
Yeah, out of that store.
Nice.
Which is a big number, and it was much higher than the number that I had anticipated in my pro forma, in my business plan. Right? So the records, and the fact that records have made an even bigger comeback in the last couple of years, although they've been coming back for a while, and I can talk about that. But, that sort of saved us. But I would still like to get the coffee shop open, still like to start doing live music and listening parties and like a hi-fi club, and just give people like a million different reasons to come and hang out at the record store. Because to me, it's so much of it is about like community and just building like relationships with other people who love music and all that kind of stuff. It's got to be that's what interests me, right? Like that's why I started it in the first place, is just because I love music so much, and I like talking about music all day, every day. So it's got to be like a community thing. So that's still our plan, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to get the coffee shop open and start doing a lot more like events there before the end of this year.
Yeah. Well, something I think that you do that I think at least somewhat abroad, I mean, not entirely abroad because I haven't gone to every record store in the world, but at least here in Chattanooga is, there's other places you can buy records in the Chattanooga area, but you all specifically, what you do is you do have, we talked about this a little bit whenever I initially came in and asked you if you even wanted to do this. You have like, your classic records, like, there's always going to be like a Hotel California Eagles record, like every record store that's going to be there, whether it's used or like a reissued version of it. But something you all do is you cater a little bit to people like me. Like I have a lot of old music that I love, like music from the 70s and 80s. Like I grew up listening to that. It's what my parents listened to all the time. It's what I, listened to in the cars with them growing up. But there's a lot of newer, more contemporary music that have come out in the last decade or so that really I enjoy a lot as well. And maybe, people like in my parents' generation, they may not, because, that's not what they listened to growing up. And so I get it. But there isn't, at least here in Chattanooga, as far as I'm aware, there's not a huge offering of records of those artists and those bands and that music, because, people want the Thrillers, people want the Hotel Californias, people want the I don't know, fill in the classic album here, and I get it. Like there's a good reason why they're classic albums and classic artists, and I get it. But to me, and we talked about this, is there's also artists that have come out right now that I really enjoy, that I want to support and I want to listen to. Like I want to listen. At the time when I came in, I picked up that Big Thief album, and I was like, I really like that album a lot, and I want to listen to it and support that band. And I think that's something that you do. Is there's not a lot of that offering in this area, at least as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong, and I think that's somewhat unique, and that's why you may drive in a different crowd than other more traditional record stores.
I think a big reason for that is just because it is a lot more risky and it's way harder to make money. So like, in kind of the old school record store business model, like there isn't a lot of money in records. Like if you think about, for me, a new record, I might make $5, 10 at the most selling at that record. And then think about how many records do you have to sell at $5 a piece to pay like one employee's salary for a year? You know what I mean? So a lot of people, and I have this like straight from a lot of other record store owners. They say, I just can't make a profit on new records, so I'm just doing used stuff, So you buy these, you buy records in bulk from people, and you pay a little bit less, and you have these larger margins, and you buy a lot of stuff that's like safe. You know what I mean? You're buying Eagles, and you're buying Michael Jackson, and you're buying Beatles records because they'll sell. Yeah. So it is really it's incredibly hard. And even at this point, two years in, I would say that we're still kind of like barely making ends meet because of how challenging it is. We try to be the shop in town that carries all the new releases like the day they come out. And we can't do all of them, right? Because it's like there's going to be some band that's like totally off the map that might have like a dozen fans here in Chattanooga, and you just can't have everything. But we try to get, we're probably getting anywhere from like 12 to 25 new releases every single week. And every single week you got to guess like how many of those can I sell? And, you're wrong all the time. And it's like, if I buy if I buy too many of this album, it might be sitting on my shelf for like a year and a half. If it, it's like with all those other records are sort of tried and tested, and how people respond to them. But with new stuff, it's like, all right, well, like The Weeknd's got a new record coming out. Like, we sell a lot of his old albums. Let's hope the new one sells well too. And then if like people don't like the new album, then you're like, well, great. Now I've got like 20 copies and they're sitting on my shelf. And it's like you don't get that money back for a year and a half or whatever, which prevents you from buying other records that would sell, right? And so it's this like, it's sort of, you get into this pile up, and that does, all of that makes it extremely challenging, which is why not as many record stores do it. But if you can do it right, then you end up sort of getting that niche of like the record stores who do carry brand new records, and where you can go get the new releases the day they come out.
And part of it too, I would imagine, is like for you specifically, and other record stores that do something similar to what you do, is you got to kind of strike while the iron is hot consecutively. Like I remember, I think the last time I came in when I got that Big Thief record, I want to say it was around when the Harry Styles album came out. I think it may not have been the weekend it came out, but it was roughly around then. And like I think you had like a display or something up, and it was just gone. Like everything. Which I mean, he's one of the biggest artists in the world, so I'm not surprised by that. But you got to have moments like that where you can try to anticipate, like, okay, I think this album is going to do well, even if it's not critically acclaimed. Like that's up for debate on every artist, but whether you can anticipate whether people are going to kind of gobble this album up or not is you have to decide that, because let's say, for instance, you think, okay, well, this artist is going to release an album. I think it's going to do really well. People are going to really want to purchase it. If for some reason it just flops and everybody's like, no, I don't want it, then you're stuck, like you said, with 25, 30 records. Like, what am I supposed to do with these? So it's definitely, I would imagine, an interesting challenge. But if you can do it right, like, I would think even to a degree it would create more demand, because like I said, I came in and all the Harry Styles records were gone, and if I like Harry Styles, but I'm not like a super ultra mega fan of his. But if I was, to me, it's like, oh shoot, I got to come back in whenever it restocks. Like I got to be ready for whenever it restocks. So it can be like an exponential growth kind of thing. Like if you can strike while the iron is hot in the right way, it not only benefits the customer, but it also benefits you, I would imagine.
Yeah, and that can even be true for legacy records, which is kind of a fun thing, where just this week, we got 10 copies of Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots by the Flaming Lips, which has been out of stock for like a year, and I think the entire time I've been open, and I've never had more than like 1 or 2 copies in stock. So it got to the point where you sort of, if you're a good buyer, you have to sort of catch these trends and realize, okay, it's been out of stock for 3 months, so I might need 5 copies when it comes back. Okay, it's been out of stock for 6 months. I might need 10 copies. It's been out of stock for a year and a half. I might need like 30 copies, right? So we got 10 copies in Thursday night, and I posted about it, and they were sold out within like 4 hours. You know what I mean? So you have that kind of thing too, where you have to watch these trends and as you said, like strike while the iron's hot on, and that's like new albums as well as like legacy albums that are maybe hard to find and hard to get.
So I have a little bit of a funny story I want to tell you about, which I want to say it was either like one of the first or second times I ever came into your store. And it wasn't on any particular day. I think it was just like a weekend. Me and my girlfriend at the time were like, we just didn't have much to do. We're like, oh, let's go check out this new record store. And it was around her birthday, which her birthday is last month in July. But it wasn't this year. It was like, I think it was the year before. And if she hears this, she'll know where I'm going with this. But do you know the band Whitney? Not Whitney Houston, but
yeah.
She really, we both enjoyed it. She really, really liked their most recent album that came out. What is it called? It's a cover album. I forget what it's. It's like I'll just look it up real quick. But it's an album, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it's entirely of covers. And what is it called? Candid, this album.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say Candid, but I didn't realize that it was a cover album.
Yeah, well, I realized it after the fact because like the top song on it is "Take Me Home, Country Road." And I was like, I know that's a John Denver song. And I looked into it, and I was like, oh, they're all covers. Like I thought that was interesting. But she really liked that album, and I knew that, but I wasn't looking for that album when I came in. I just knew that in the back of my head.
Yeah.
And you had it at the time, and so when we walked in, I saw it, and I was like, oh shoot! I was like, here it is. Like her birthday's coming up a little bit. I was like, maybe I can try and get this. And she looked at me. She was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick, whatever." And I was like, "Okay, I gotta try to get this thing bought like while she's in there. Like if I can be real fast and get this bought while she's in there, whatever." So I picked it, but at the time I was like, I don't want to just have this one record, like because she's gonna want to see what I got in the bag, like whatever. If I buy a record, and so I tried to be real slick about it, and so I picked up that record, and then an album I really enjoyed that I had been wanting to get was was Titanic Rising by Wise Blood.
Yeah.
I love that album. I love that album so much. And I saw that one, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So I got both of them. I put the Whitney album on the bottom, and then I put the Wise Blood album right on top of it. Like I tried to cover the cover of the Whitney album. And by that time, she had come out of the bathroom, so I was like, okay, I gotta really hope. Like, I'm going to go check these out. And then in the back of my head, I was like, I really hope he doesn't, like, separate the two. Like, he doesn't pull the top one off and then scan the bottom one and then show that I'm getting that other album, which you didn't at the time. It was so funny because I was, like, if you can imagine it, it's just the two albums right on top of each other. And you scan the first one, and I think you just scanned the bottom of the Whitney album and then put it in the bag. And I was like, okay, as long as she doesn't realize that I'm paying for two out, like, because, it came out to like $60 or whatever. Right. And I was like, as long as she doesn't
That's an expensive Wise Blood album.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, if she sees the total, she's like, was that album really $60? Like, that's what I was thinking she was going to say.
Yeah.
And she didn't end up catching it or anything, but I felt very like my anxiety levels were like on a high because I was like, I really hope he doesn't separate these albums, and I hope she doesn't question the fact that I'm buying what looks like a $60 album or anything. And it all worked out fine in the end, but it was just funny because
all the stars aligned.
Everything worked out perfectly. But I remember handing those two. I'm pretty sure it was just you that was there, and I handed them to you, and I was like, "Please do not separate these albums. Just scan both of them and put them back in the bag."
That's funny because I usually stick them in my lap and then just flip through them in my lap and scan them, which means they all end up in the same order. And they don't.
And so I was like, just scan the barcode, put it in the bag. Scan the barcode, put it in the bag. Don't look at them. It was funny, and I just thought that was funny.
Glad it worked out. I didn't even know.
Yeah, it was fun, which I wouldn't expect you to remember just a random encounter with the records, but I thought it was fun.
No, I didn't even know I was an asset to the at the time.
Yeah, you were the third party in this scheme of mine, and you weren't even aware of it. But something else I want to ask you about is, so I didn't camp out or anything, but I recently experienced my first record store day of my life. Like I've been wanting to in a while, like go to a record store on record store day. I just never have really gotten the chance. And if I was here, I was planning on going to your store because I like your store and everything. But I was actually I was with my sister and brother-in-law in South Carolina at the time. And so I was like, okay, we were out there. We're actually going to a Billy Joel concert, which is really fun. And we went out there and we had like a free day, and we're like, let's go to I told him, I was like, can we go to a record store? Like, it's record store day, And so we didn't camp out or anything. I know there's like long lines and whatnot, but that was my first time seeing a store on record store day, just people, coming in and out and all over the place. And I saw pictures of your store whenever it was record store day, and it seemed like there was a lot of people like waiting outside, and I know there was like a Taylor Swift release that weekend, I think. What was that experience like for you?
Was wild. Yeah. So we had done last year they did like Record Store Day drops. So they like split it up. So in 2021, there were like 2 or 3 different dates where the titles dropped. And you're looking at over 400 titles. So they were spread out. So we still had people like camping out at like 4 in the morning to like get that Grateful Dead box set or whatever. But then, so this year, even Record Store Day told us, they were like, this is the first official Record Store Day since the pandemic. The others, those were drops. This is Record Store Day where it's all like one date basically. So I was not totally prepared, for just how crazy it was going to be. I mean, we did 10 times the amount of business on that Saturday than we would on a normal Saturday. So it's just nuts. But the craziest thing I think that happened was, as you mentioned, there was that Taylor Swift 7-inch that came in.
And was it just a song? Was it just the alternate?
The Lakes, and then there was like an alternate version.
On the, so it wasn't like a full album.
So not only was it a single, but the B side was the same song as the A side, but a different version of it. So. So the craziest thing that happened was Friday afternoon. I'm, running checkout, and this couple walks in, and they're like, "Hi, we're here to get in line." And it was 3 PM the day before. And I was like, okay, cool. And they're like, we have a tent and everything. And so, we let people in a different door on Record Store Day. And so they just went over there and set up a tent in front of that door. And they were there for 17 hours,
So were they the first ones in line?
The first ones in line, Jeez. So the line started 17 hours before we opened at 9 a.m. the next day. And they were there for the Taylor Swift single. So they were not the only ones. By the time I left that night, and I probably left at like around midnight.
Is this on
night.
Friday?
This is on Friday. Okay. So I left probably at midnight. And even at midnight, I think there was probably a dozen people outside waiting. And they just stayed on it. I mean, we got a concrete front deck and
And it's also there's like a ramp too. Like it's
that's right. There's a handicap ramp, and we have people form a line down that ramp for Record Store Day. So they're just like on a hard concrete ramp for the entire night to get one Taylor Swift song. But it was wild because the next day, I mean, like it was within an hour. It was gone. It was gone. And what we did is we handed out like slips. So I came out at 8 a.m. the next morning and said like, okay, I think I had 11 copies of it or something like that. Anyway, so and so I said, I've got 11 slips here. So if I hand you a slip, you're guaranteed to get one. Come up to the counter and get it, because I didn't want people like pushing and shoving and like trying to fight to trying to take more than
Friday madness.
Exactly. So we put those behind the counter, and we're like, if you get a voucher, then you can come up to the front checkout and claim your Taylor Swift record. So which they were all super happy about that. So that was definitely the wildest experience, but it was crazy busy all day, and we had shows that night, and so I was there from like 8 a.m. until probably 10 or 11 p.m. that day.
Did you so you said you had 11 copies of the Taylor Swift single, right?
I think so, if memory serves.
Was there more people in line for it than copies you had?
By the time I got there the next morning, there were probably 40 people in line, and not necessarily all of them were there for Taylor Swift, but definitely like the kind of thing where, like, I knew one guy who's a regular at the shop was like, oh yeah, if they have the Taylor Swift, I'm going to get it. And he was like 2 people back from where I had stopped.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, what that experience was like. It's like, okay, you get a Taylor Swift album and you get one, and then I hate to break it to you, buddy.
Exactly.
4 in the afternoon yesterday. You're not going to get it.
Here's the funniest thing. Well, it's not funny. It's sort of, it's funny if you like dark humor like I do. There were at least like 3 or 4 different people who told me, they're like, oh yeah, I came by at like 5 a.m. and I just saw how many people were in line, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to get one, so I'm going to go try one of the other record stores. And the last person in line who got one got there at like 7:30 or something like that. So there were at least 3 different people where I had to tell them, I was like, if you had gotten in line when you drove by at 5, you would have gotten one.
Jeez. That's that just rips your heart out. You know? Jeez. I just like, part of me wants to do something like that. Like, part of me is like, let me just once in my life just like camp. I've never been like a huge Black Friday. Like, I'll go and look at the store. But I'm not gonna like camp outside for a drone or something. Like, I don't care that much, you know. But there's a small part of me that's like, I wonder what it's like just to be like, yep, we're gonna just stay out here all night and we're gonna get the release, you know.
I've never really done anything like. I think the closest thing I've ever done to that is I went to see a Star Wars movie when I was in high school, where they had like a midnight showing. You know what I mean? And so you go and you get in line at like, 9 p.m. and you just hang out with your friends on the sidewalk outside the theater. And there's, all these people there in like costumes and twirling lightsabers. And like, I like Star Wars, but it was just sort of like, this is something that we could do,
No, I had a similar experience whenever, I think it was when Rogue One came out. Me and some of my friends were going to go see it. And it wasn't a midnight premiere, but it was the premiere at that particular movie theater. It was like, I don't know, like 10 o'clock or something. And there wasn't like a huge line, but we got there a little bit early. And there was a guy, unless he had put on a like physical costume, he looked to be an elderly man. But he had, he could have like put on a fake wig or something.
Like dressed as Obi-Wan or something.
He did. I have a picture of him on my phone. It was what looked to be this elderly man with these Jedi robes on. And we all looked at him and were like, is this guy really, like, he's doing it? And he walked past us and like did the Jedi like hand wave and stuff. I was like, okay, he's really committed to it. He was like at the first Star Wars. I thought he was like, he was there when it was just Star Wars. It wasn't A New Hope. It was like just that's all it was. You know? I've never done anything like that. I've seen a lot of people do that because my grandparents live up right off the main road up near Pigeon Forge, up in that area. And there's all those stores up there. And so if we ever go up there for Thanksgiving, we'll see people just camping out in front of us. Not so much anymore because usually stores, like, at least on Black Friday, they'll like do it like a 3-day thing. So it's not all at once, But I'll see people all the time just like, we're camped out here for 12 hours. We're just going to, tough it out and we're going to get that new copy of this, that, and the other, whatever, So it's crazy, but,
that's not my thing.
No, it's not my thing, but there is part of me that's like, I want to do it just one time, just to say that I did it,
Right,
But the record store we went to, it was really, I forget the name of it, but I was so excited because I was really, it wasn't a record store day exclusive or anything, but I wanted to get a copy of the new Black Country New Road album. And I was really excited because like, I love that album. It's honestly, so far, probably my favorite album of the year. So I love that album. And I wasn't like, I didn't know if they had it. And so I was just looking around and I couldn't find it for whatever reason. Like, I don't know if I just messed up the alphabet and couldn't figure out where the B section was, but I went up to the guy and I was like, hey, do you have this new album? He was like, oh yeah, it's over here. He was like, yeah, so we have the regular version and then we have the deluxe version with the live performance of some of the songs on the album. And I was like, okay. I was like, this is what I needed. I was like, this is it right here. And I usually don't get deluxe versions because I just want to get the regular one and whatever. But that album in particular, it had a live performance of not all of the songs on that album, but it had a live performance of the last song. The last song is called Basketball Shoes, and I was like, that it's like one of my favorite, probably my favorite song on the album, and just one of my favorite songs in general. And I was like, I have to have it. This is for me. I have to have this, And it was really cool. So it was cool to be there and get to kind of see a record store kind of buzzing and people going about during the day. Something you mentioned that I want to ask you about is you had briefly mentioned the kind of resurgence of vinyl records, I guess, in the past, I don't know exactly the timeline, but I'll say 5 years, I guess would be fair to say. And I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but from what I've seen, it seems to be that, CD sales have never, for most of my life, haven't really been that popular. They kind of died out like at the 2010s, I think. Like they're not super popular just because of streaming and things like that. But it seems to me like from what I've seen that vinyl records have made a bit of a comeback in some strange way. What's that like? What's your kind of take on that, and what's your experience been like that so far?
So I'm going to try to remember some of the numbers off the top of my head because I have had to read up on this stuff. So, essentially when we were starting the record store, if you looked at like 2000, I want to say it was like 2006 through 2018, that 12-year period, new record sales in the U.S. went up 27% year over year, compound annual growth, which is pretty big for any industry, right? So that's why, when I referenced it earlier, I said, well, they've really been making a comeback for a while, but it wasn't quite like the gross sales weren't quite up to this point where it was like really like kind of blowing up on anybody's radar. But that's really for me when I experienced it, starting to come around. So my personal story with records is that, you know, all through high school and then early college, which for me, I went to college in 2006. So like 06, 07, even probably a little bit into 08, I was buying tons of CDs still, you know, just filling up my, you know, massive like wallet of CDs. I'd go to McKay's all the time, you know, which is here in Chattanooga, of course. And they were at a different location then, but for me, I just loved the experience of like going into a store and searching for that album that I've been looking for, or like finding something new, even buying something just based on a cover, and then listening to it and like taking a risk on it. So I was, in my heart, I was just a music collector, like period, and it happened to be CDs at the time. But then, you know, even at that point, you know, you'd buy all these CDs, but then you'd rip them onto your computer and put them on your iPod as well, you know? And so while I was in college, the CD thing kind of fell off and people weren't buying CDs as much anymore because you could download on iTunes and all that kind of stuff. And everybody was using iPods. And so for me, that kind of left a little bit of a hole. So probably somewhere in like 08, 09, some of my friends were starting to buy records at the time. They're super cheap, and so this would have been right at the sort of beginning of the very first hint of a vinyl resurgence. And I was like, well, that's cool. Like I can get on board with that because I still just wanted to collect. You know, I liked curating. I liked searching. I liked hunting for. You know, and I just love that experience of being in a record store. So I started buying records, you know, in like 08, 09, something like that. But hadn't really done it in earnest until like probably the last 5 or 6 years, where just my, you know, collection started growing a lot faster. But yeah, so for that 12-year period, like 06 to 2018, it was like 27% year-over-year growth. And then from like 18 to 19, I think it was actually it was like 19 to 20. It jumped up to 40% that it grew. And then from 20 to 21, I think it was close to 50% growth. So you know, when people talk about this vinyl resurgence, it has been something that's been coming on for a really long time, and it's been growing really steadily and at a pretty high rate. But these last 2 years, it was just like kind of on steroids. I think a big part of that is because suddenly people were, you know, trapped in their houses with nothing to do. They were spending less money at bars and restaurants. So they had this disposable income, you know, and they decided to invest in hobbies, you know. So I think that, but because vinyl was already making this comeback, it was already at that level where it was sort of, it was high enough in people's like awareness or consciousness that it was like, oh, my friend's buying vinyl, like that seems fun. I could get into that. So I think we have had a lot of people who've come in and started collecting in the last couple of years, for sure.
I think part of it too, which something else I want to ask you about, which you can kind of, I think you'll see where I'm going with it, is, you know, with the explosion of streaming in the past 4 to 5 years as well. Like, I mean, it's been around, like, you know, Spotify's been around for a while, but it really has taken hold, I think, since like I was, probably since, I remember I got Apple Music, which I don't know, you know, the great Spotify, Apple Music debate. I don't know what compelled me to go to Apple Music as opposed to Spotify, but I don't particularly have any allegiance to either one of them necessarily. But like, you know, that was when I got on that, because I was like, you know, the inherent benefits of it's like, oh, you can pretty much listen to anything whenever you want for like a monthly price of whatever. But I think the kind of the pros to that are obvious, but the con of that is music to me felt so much less personal. Like it was like, I could listen to whatever albums I want. I can discover a lot more music, like artists I've never heard of. There's no way I would have found these people on my own, much less purchased their album just on a whim, you know? So like the benefits of that are there, but to me, the experience for a lot of it just kind of became a little bit background. Like I wasn't very, it's a little abstract, but I wasn't super present with the music.
Right.
Like,
it can become background noise.
In some music, some albums that were like, you know, there's some albums that I have very fond memories of that I experienced streaming on my phone and stuff, but not all of them was the case like that. And so for me, because people have asked me before, like people my age, because it was, not to be that person, but like a lot of my friends that do collect records or like have interest in it, like, or a lot of my friends don't really collect records. And so they were asking like, why are you purchasing these records? Like you can just listen to these albums on your phone, whatever.
Yeah.
And for me, part of it is I just like collecting these things and I'm interested and I want to support the artist. But when you listen to a record on a turntable, it forces you to be present in the music. Like,
absolutely.
I could walk out of here and put headphones in and start listening to whatever album and it just goes through it and that's fine. But there's going to be some degree of it just kind of being in the background. It's not super present right in the front, the forefront of my mind. But like where my turntable is, like I can only listen to it where that turntable is, and I can only listen to it right there. And so it forces me to not only physically be present in that room, but I have no other choice but to listen to what's being said and sung and played. And I think there's some beauty to that. Like I really enjoyed that. It makes me be more invested in the music and what they're actually saying or what they're actually doing. And that was part of the reason why I kind of took to it and got interested in it, because I've never really had that yet in my life. Like I was never super into CDs or anything like that.
Right.
And obviously streaming and purchasing digitally didn't really have any personal connection to me. And so that's kind of why I really latched onto it. Funny enough, I remember when I first purchased my first record ever. It was I got them on Amazon, and it was 3 albums, and it was just like any other future vinyl collector. I got reissues of Abbey Road, The Dark Side of the Moon, and a Rolling Stones album. I was like, this is when I first saw that, I was like, oh yeah, those are cool albums. Like I want to listen to that, which they are good albums. And it was what album was it? It was the I think it was Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones. The one with like the cake on the front. Yeah. And I remember that particular album. I mean, I enjoyed all those albums and whatnot, but that particular album, when I got it in the mail, I had unboxed Abbey Road, unboxed Dark Side, and I was like, okay, I want to open up, the Rolling Stones album. And I don't know why, still to this day, I don't know why. I don't know if this is standard across the board with that album in particular. And I've never seen this, well, I take it back, I've seen it with a couple albums, but the disc was clear. It was like, not, like, it was like, entirely, like I could see my hand through it. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this the way that like, I was like, are all albums like this? I was like, can you just, can you get special discs with all of them? And I thought that was like the coolest thing. I was like, I thought that I'd found like the secret Rolling Stones album that like nobody else had. Like this one's clear and translucent. And like from that moment, I was hooked. I was like, okay, this is really cool. Like I had a really kind of intimate experience with it there. And so that's what took me to want to keep collecting and exploring and support these artists in that way. And so I'm glad that it's making a resurgence the way that it is, because I think it like I said, it forces people to have these intimate experiences with the music and also be a little more present with it and enjoy it and have that collector mentality as well. I think people want to collect things and own things and to be able to say, this is mine and show off what they have. So I'm really glad that it's making a comeback, and also it allows people like you to do what you do, so.
Yeah. I always like to joke that like we're not that different from raccoons or ravens, we're just like, we like to collect things, we and I just think that's part of who we are, as part of being like, we're physical animals and we exist in like physical time and space. And so the more that our lives sort of get sucked into the cybersphere, I think the more there's a bit of a pendulum swing to try to find ways to be more physically present, right? And I think vinyl is just one way of doing that, but like everybody's a collector, like some people collect shoes, some people collect like cookware, you know what I mean? So vinyl is just one of those things where it's like everybody's a collector, like I said, and if you love music, there's a pretty good chance that you might be interested in collecting vinyl, and there's so many different reasons like that people do collect vinyl. Some people say, oh, it sounds better. And it's like, well, that's only true if you have like certain kinds of equipment, because if you're playing a record on like a suitcase turntable, it doesn't necessarily sound better, right? But that doesn't mean that it's not valuable. That person's experience who's listening to a record on a suitcase turntable, that their experience is less important, right? And some people do it because like, I want to support the artist, because I ran the numbers on this not too long ago, but I mean, you'd have to stream an album. I want to say it's like 25. It's like 6,000 times or something like that, in order for an artist to make as much as they would make with the purchase of one record, right? So that's another great reason to buy vinyl, is like just to keep artists in business, like support them and do what they do. Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, when it all comes down to it, the most important reason that you would collect vinyl is just because it's fun, and that's kind of what you're describing with like, seeing that transparent Rolling Stones, translucent Rolling Stones album. It's just like, this is fun, you know? And you can't, you know, a lot of another thing. One of my employees likes to say, well, you can't hear color. And that's true. And sometimes it's harder to like assess the condition of a colored record. Like if you ever look at like that translucent Rolling Stones album, it's really hard to see if there's a scratch on there or anything. But you know, might be going a little bit of a rabbit trail on colored vinyl, but you know, the value of colored vinyl is not only is it fun, not only does it look cool and kind of has a certain aesthetic, but you know, certain records are colored, and it's like a sort of a shorthand for knowing, you know, whether an album is limited edition and whether it might appreciate in value. And that's, you know, that's another thing you can talk about, whether it's important, you know, as a record collector, if your records have like monetary value or not, right? That's kind of part and parcel to collector culture, no matter what you're collecting, though. But with colored records, I like to tell people, like, look, if you buy like an opaque red like version, like indie exclusive version of you know, the new Black Midi album, which actually I think
there probably is a opaque version of that album.
It might have a different, you know, it might be like you know, crimson splatter or something like that. But you know, but if you get that record, it's not that much different than if you get like a first press of a Led Zeppelin record. If that, you know, album becomes beloved and is, you know, desirable to people like 30 years from now, then that colored vinyl becomes a shorthand for like, this is an original press and it was limited to 3,000 copies, right? So in that case, you know, when you're talking about collectible albums, like to me, that's kind of one of the key benefits of the, you know, these colored versions. And you have to be smart. Like, you know, you can go buy a colored version at like Walmart or Target, but those aren't necessarily limited edition. So it's like, well, this may be one of like 30,000 copies, right? So we're getting kind of down in the weeds on collector culture here. But you know, if you buy an artist exclusive, where it's like, I got this directly from the artist's website, it was one of 300 copies, and like, that's an album that's going to be like pretty valuable someday. Whether or not you want to sell it, it's just fun to say like, I have this first press, right? And there's only 300 of these made, and that's true whether it's colored or not. Like if you talk about like a, you know, butcher cover Beatles record of yesterday and today, it's like this is one of, I probably should know this, but I don't know how many there are of those. But you know, that's just like the fun of collector culture.
Do you have any albums in your personal collection that, like, if you were to go to like, you know, if you were going to show off, like if someone said, hey, show me like 3 albums from your collection that you're really proud, like those are like your babies, you know, like those are the ones that like you're, not as, I mean, you know, some of it is like, just like, it may not even be, it could be, you know, there could be 100,000 in existence, but like more from the standpoint of like what you were saying.
Like,
the
ones that I'm
ones where it's like, there's only 12 of these out there, and I've got, you know.
I've got a few of those. You know, somebody asked me early on when I was starting that, I did like a radio interview, and they were like, what's your holy grail? And I was kind of, at the time I was like, I don't know if I really have one, because I'm not super interested in the collector culture side of things. It's sort of something that like I'll sort of passively participate in, that it's like, oh, I really want this album, and if I can get the, you know, like this exclusive version, then I'll get it, because then I know if my kids ever need to sell my records, like it will be worth a little more. Most important thing is taking good care of your records. So let's you know what I mean? That's always the biggest like deflating, like somebody brings in their dad's record collection or their grandpa's record collection, and they've been left sitting in a basement for like 20 years. And it's like, sorry, these records, I actually had one of those where I was like, this collection would have been worth probably $2,000, but I can give you $100 for it because half of it's water damage, right? So that's a whole other rabbit trail. But in my collection, there's like a handful of records that you know, I just have like really fond memories of. I had a personal connection to that record, like at a specific time in life, and they're not that popular, and so they're really hard to find. So in my case, most of those ones that are like kind of valuable are records that just there aren't that many copies of, because nobody else really cares about them, you know. So a lot of people will expect, because like, oh, he's a record store owner, so he probably has like, you know, a first UK press of Rubber Soul, and he probably has Led Zeppelin 4 from like, you know, original. But I'm not that like I tend to buy more new records than old records because I'm more interested in just getting like a clean copy that sounds really good than I am in having like, oh, this record is worth $300. I'm not a wealthy person. I don't make much money at all doing this. So like I can't afford to buy $300 records.
Yeah.
So all that is to say, the records in my collection that I really love, there is an album called House of Apples and Eyeballs, and it came out in probably like, I bet it's like 06, 05 kind of era. And it's by two bands. They came together and did this album together, Black Month, Super Rainbow, and the Octopus Project. So those bands got together and they made this album, and it's not on streaming. I can't find it anywhere. It's not on Spotify. It's not on Tidal. It's not on YouTube. And so I found a copy online. This record store in like California had it for sale. And so I bought it. And that is one of my favorite records that I own just because the only way I can listen to it is in my ancient iTunes library on my computer or on vinyl. I can't, I don't even think it's on YouTube. I don't know why that is. I don't know. It might be a distribution issue or something, or a copyright issue. But that's one of my favorites. It's a beautiful copy and it sounds awesome. The bass is like just super big and full, and so there's that. There's an album by Sun Kill Moon called Tiny Cities that I just had like a great experience with in college. It's a beautiful album. And it's pretty hard to find. So it's probably the album that I spent like $75 on that album, just because it's really hard to find. It's out of print. And one other one that same thing. It's like the same era, the early 2000s when there weren't that many copies being made, and apparently there's not enough demand to keep it in print, and so it's just hard to find. So there's an album by Matt Pond, PA, that came out on polyvinyl back in like probably 07, 08. It's called Several Arrows Later, and it's just out of print. And I found a copy, and so those are the ones that they're not worth a ton of money, but they're just really hard to find, and they sort of have special memories for me. When it comes to like legacy records, like I'm a big fan of like The Cure and the Smiths, and I would love to find a copy of Wish by The Cure. It came out in like '92. It's one of my favorite albums of theirs. And up until now, that copy it's super hard to find. And if you find a copy, it's probably going to cost you $200 or $300. They just announced like a week or two ago that they're doing a 30th anniversary repress of it this year in November. And so I'm just like over the moon about it because, it's like, I don't really care if I have an OP of that record. I just want to have it on vinyl. So if I can get like a $40 like deluxe reissue with some cool, like with a bonus EP in it, like I'm totally happy.
That's kind of my attitude with as well. Like there is a part of me that's like, I think in everybody's heart there's some degree of like it would be really cool to have like an original of Led Zeppelin 4. Maybe I should get. There's a little bit of that in me. I get that. But to me, at the end of the day, it's like I just want to have it on. I just want to have it. Like if it's like an original pressing or not, like that's cool. But like I mentioned how one of the first albums I bought was like an Abbey Road off Amazon, which I know for a fact it's not like an OG one. It's like probably like the 20th reissue of it or something. Like it's not going to be worth $20 anywhere. Like I get it, But that's just a great album. Like I just wanted that album and just wanted to have it. You know? And so like I totally get that. You mentioned the Smiths. I haven't listened to a lot of their music. I know of them, but my now fiance, which is getting used to saying that now.
Congrats on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. She recently, she may listen to this and be like, no, I've had this for a while, but I'm pretty sure she recently got. I was looking it up to find out it was one of their albums. I think it was The Queen is Dead. Is that She I'm fairly certain, again I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain she really, really enjoys that album, and she got it. I don't know if it was an original one or not, or if it was a reissue or something. I have no idea, but she was just really excited to get that, and it's like cool seeing those moments where it may not, that the one that she has could be worth money. I have no idea, but to her, that didn't really matter. It was like, I just
Yeah.
want to have this album because it's special to me
Yeah.
and I really enjoy it. And, it's something I enjoy listening to,
Yeah.
and that's, I have that same mentality to it to a degree. Me and her are a little bit different, where she likes to collect older albums as opposed to newer albums for whatever reason. But one album that I don't know if it's worth, like, I mean, I know I could sell it if I wanted to, but it's not like ultra exclusive, whatever. It's the deluxe edition of Childish Gambino's album, Awaken My Love.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoy that album because I'm a sucker for just that whole sound, that era that it's inspired by.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this whenever I purchased it, because part of the reason, there's a lot of just kind of cool little things that come with the deluxe version of it. And I saw it like Best Buy or something. I was like, okay, I want it. And I didn't know this though, but one of the songs on that album, it's called The Night Me and Your Mama Met. And there's no lyrics to it. It's just an instrumental. It's like 3 or 4 minutes long, but it's so beautiful. Like, it's just a great piece of music. And I love listening to it sometimes, just like hearing it. There's like a guitar solo in it. It's very jazzy, and like it's just really good. And I didn't know this was on there, but I remember clear as day. I was sitting in my room. I had all the lights off except I had some string lights around my ceiling. I had them on, I was just listening to that album. And once you get to the end of the album, like the last song plays, there's another song on it. And I was like, it started playing. And I was like, what is going on? The last song just ended. What is playing right now? And it was a live performance of The Night Me and Your Mama Met, but he was singing to it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the cool, I did
the
not
Easter
know.
egg.
Yeah, I was like, what? This is on here? So I had a video of it, and I was like, I cannot believe what I'm listening to right now. I've never heard, I didn't even know this existed. Like, I've never heard a live performance of this song, much less with lyrics.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there just listening to it, like, this is the coolest thing. This is so, I was just sitting there, like, just staring up at my room, like, this is really cool. And I would like replay it. I just kept going back and forth and replaying it. And it's moments like that that are really cool. Like, again, I don't know. I'm sure I could sell that album if I wanted to, but to me, it's not about that. Like, I just really enjoy that album and really love the sound of it and everything that comes along with it. And it's cool to have those albums where the monetary value of it isn't what's important to you. It's just the experience you have with it,
Yeah.
And I'm right there with you on it. One other album this is showing the different eras that we both grew up in, of our tastes, is one album that I'm so glad that I have. And I think it was just a Black Friday exclusive, I don't think it's ever been released officially in any other form. Was Frank Ocean's Blonde is that album. And I think it's the only time it ever officially commercially came out was on Black Friday. And it was like $40 or $50, but I love that.
It's probably worth a few hundred.
I love that album.
Least
And as soon as I saw that, it was like, yeah, this thing is up for 24 hours. I was like, I don't care what the price is, I'm getting that.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because the cover of that album is a picture of him, and his hair is like green,
Mm-hmm.
But every picture on that album, the cover, the back of it, every sleeve is all in black and white. And it's just really cool. Like, I remember getting it and I was like, this is the coolest thing. Like, I know it was limited. It was only up for 24 hours. And I don't think there's ever been a reissue of that album since. I mean, there may be in the future, but having things like that, I know that one's probably worth a little bit of money, but to me, I don't care. Like, I just love that album.
Right.
I think it's great. And having, a kind of special version of it is really cool. So, it's just, I think streaming music doesn't allow you to have as much of those experiences, which is why vinyl is really cool to me.
I feel like vinyl really helps to fortify these memories that you're describing. When you were talking about streaming earlier, and I use streaming all the time.
Yeah, no, I do.
But
I do as well.
I mean, it's just such a great way to find new music and discover new music who you may not have had access to before.
Yeah.
But if I really love an album, then I want to go get a copy on vinyl just because I want to have it.
Yeah.
I want to support the artist, all of those things. But the other thing that strikes me about streaming is that I think about how forgettable music can be. And you talked about this earlier. And there's so many times when I've had a song come on that I'm like, I completely forgot this song existed.
Yeah.
Who is this artist? I don't remember. I probably heard this 4 or 5 years ago, and I really loved this song, and I forgot about it because the interaction that I had with it was so it just wasn't tangible. You know what I mean? And so I forgot about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that happens, and then I'll go and start looking is this on vinyl? Because I would, and sometimes it'll be an artist that it was just like I haven't even listened to the whole album yet, but I'm like, well, maybe I could get it on vinyl so that I won't forget about it.
Yeah,
like, and maybe I could experience this album in a whole new way, and become a fan of this artist instead of just forgetting about it and hearing the song again 5 years from now.
Something you mentioned earlier, which I want to just ask you about, is you mentioned sometimes you'll go buy an album just because the cover art looks cool, or just like, something I like to do if I ever go to a store that has a section like this is the first time I ever did it. It was a record store up in Knoxville, and I think it was called, I'm assuming they're still in operation, I don't know, but it was called Lost and Found Records, and it was the only record store close to, aside from like a Goodwill, like my hometown. It's a very small town, and that was the closest one I was aware of. I was like, I'll just have to drive a little bit over an hour to go to a record store if I want to. But they had a $1 section. It was like, whatever you want, it could be a copy, whatever, it's $1 section. And I told myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to get this record that I do want, like whatever record I was looking for at the time, but I'm just going to pick a random one out of there. Like, I'm just going to, drag it was like on the bottom shelf. I'm just going to pick it, and whatever it is, I'm going to buy it.
Yeah.
And it was one of the best purchases I've made, because it's like, I think it's like a compilation album, but it's a disco compilation album. Yeah. And it's got all these disco songs from like the 60s on it. I got it and I was like, okay, this thing is very scratched up. I don't know if it's going to work, but it's for $1. Let's just go for it and see what happens. Yeah. And it has so many great songs on it. And the cover is awesome. It's hilarious. It's just hilarious, the story of it, because I've never even heard of it in my entire life. And I remember when I first got it, my mom was like, oh, let's put she was like, I think I've heard I know some of these songs. Like, I remember listening to them when I was growing up. And at the time, I think I had a portable record player. I forget the one. It was some cheap one I bought off Amazon. And I brought it down into our kitchen, and I was like, okay, let's see if this, like, this is my first time playing. I was like, I don't know if this is even going to work. I bought it for $1. Let's see what happens. And I set the needle down, and it started going. And it was playing, I don't remember what song it was playing, but it started going. I was like, this is great. I'm like, this is so much fun. So we were like all just in the kitchen, like dancing around, doing stuff, listening to these old disco songs. Like, it was so much fun. And so, it is kind of fun doing that, because it's like you just don't know what you're going to get into. It's like, let's just see what happens and see what I can get. One other time too, one of my friends, he had a subscription to, have you heard of Vinyl Me Please? You heard that before? Yeah. He had a subscription to them, and you can, like, if you're subscribed to their service, you can purchase from their library. Like, you can get the monthly shipments, but you can also just like buy stuff from their exclusive library. Yeah. And I had never even heard of this band or album before in my life. I think the name of the band is called Islands, I think. And I still haven't. I've listened at the time. I'd never heard of the album, but I just saw the disc, and it was like translucent with like pink and gray speckle all over it. And I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I have to have that. Yeah. And he was like, have you listened to this album before? I said, no, I have no idea what this sounds like, but I just want to have that. And so I asked him if he would get it for me, and I'd pay him back, whatever. And I remember getting it, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I don't know what this sounds like, though. I have no idea. This album could be just like an hour of ambient music for all I know. I have no idea. Yeah. So I eventually put it on and listened to it. It was pretty good. Like, I did enjoy it, but it's just funny, like that element of discovery with records. I think that's something that's really special with them, and something that I think is really cool. Yeah. I love it when people come through the shop, and somebody recently like picked up this copy of Up and Away by Stella, which came out on Sub Pop this year. Yeah. And she's like a Greek pop artist, and it's one of my favorite albums that I've heard this year. And somebody brought a copy up, and I was like, oh, this record's so good. And they're like, oh, really? Like, I just saw the cover, and I thought it looked cool. Yeah. And I was like, good for you. Like, that's great. You're gonna. I think you're going to like this. Yeah. One more thing about records that I don't know how to quantify it, but something about seeing an album cover big, like in your hands, like you're used to seeing it be either very small as a CD or just like a picture, little thumbnail. Yeah. Something about seeing it like very big and in your hands is like, I don't know it's just something special about it. I don't know. Like, it's just cool seeing this. It doesn't, to me, it almost like doesn't seem real. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just like this piece, because an album cover is just a piece of art at the end of the day. Like, it's a picture or a painting or something, like whatever the artist decided to, represent the sound of their album with. But seeing it kind of come to life in your hands, and like, oh wow, I can hold this thing, like it's in my hands and I can look through it. I don't know. There's something about that that's just really cool, I think, and something that I think is, for whatever reason, it's just a unique experience with records, Yeah. I mean, it's like I said
earlier, we're physical animals. We exist in time and space, So I think that the visual component is important, and that like the colored vinyl, as much as some people may rag on it, it's like, well, it's really just part of the artwork. It's just trying to create some visual appeal for the listener, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that's just I think that's part of the reason that I enjoyed collecting CDs so much, and that's part of the reason that there was like a gap when CDs went away, and I wasn't really doing that anymore. And now with records, it's like it's magnified even more. It's just bigger and better, and it's just tons of fun. It takes up more space in my house, but I don't care.
Well, also too, there's something, I think a small part of why records have made such a resurgence is it's just pretty to have them on a shelf. Like if you've got a decently sizable, even if you just got a few, like if you just got a handful, I know some people that just have like a handful of records just because they want to have them. Like there's something about like they just look nice. Like the ones
classic.
I have, like the ones I have, I've got it like a 3-tiered shelf, and like the top shelf is full. The second shelf might be the second shelf, it's like almost full, but just like having the stacks of the albums side by side and the different colors and the names. There's just something like pleasing to look at that. It's similar to like a bookshelf. Like if you see a full bookshelf, it's like, man, that's a lot of stuff. There's something about it. Well, first and foremost, I've really enjoyed talking to you today. It's been great, and I just thank you very much for chatting with me.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
It has been great chatting with you, and I've been looking forward to this because I genuinely do. Like, I'm not just saying this because you're right in front of me, but like I've been, of the times I've been to Yellow Racket, I think it's a really cool place, and I think it serves a very unique purpose in this area because I do think there's other record stores in the area, but like I think you all do. You've kind of caught something unique with the. I guess the best word I can use to explain it is like the kind of the vibe of the store. Like I know that's a very broad word, but like you have a specific feel of the store, and the kind of audience that you cater towards is people like me that haven't really been catered towards yet. And so I think you all do a lot of great work, and I'm really excited to see. I'm glad to see you all are still doing well, and that you're growing and doing well. So congrats to you on that, and thank you for taking a little bit of time to chat with me today.
Thank you so much.
Before we finish up here, I have a little segment that I like to finish each episode off with. It's totally unrelated to everything we've just said, but it's a way I just like to end the show off with. And it is called, I've been calling it 15 quick questions.
All right.
And these are all this or that questions. So it's, going to be A or B, yes or no. You just give me your off the top of your head.
The lightning round.
Yeah, the lightning round. Yeah. But I wanna just hear your thoughts. Some of these are music related. Some of these are not. Whatever. But
the challenge for me here is going to be keeping it short because I tend to talk a lot.
Hey, me and you both. But
I'll do my best.
I just want to hear your
quick take
off the top of your head, your answer, and you can give your rationale if you want. Like the more the better. But I got 15 questions for you, and I want to see what your thoughts are. So,
okay.
All right, ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, this is 15 quick questions with Ben. Number 1, socks with sandals, yes or no?
I don't care.
Okay, let me.
It's cool either way. Okay. I don't care. Okay. You get you know what I mean? Like, so, it's not. I mean, it's like.
It sounds like to me you're leaning more on the yes side than. No.
Yeah, I'm leaning on the yes. Okay. Yeah, I don't care. Like, if you want to wear socks with sandals, that's cool. Like, I don't care. That's fine, man. Okay. I guess that's a yes.
Yeah. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Absolutely, 100%.
Dark Side the Wall or Wish You. I'm a Pink Floyd fan, so that's what I'm asking. Dark Side the Wall or Wish You Were Here.
It's Piper at the Gates of Dawn for me.
Oh, really? I like that. I like that. That one is. I came onto that one late at like any Floyd fan. I was introduced with Dark Side first, but that one is one that I've slowly had more appreciation for. Over the years. So you're a Piper fan.
Here's a little bit of context. I read that. I'm a guitar player, and I read this book when I was in middle school, and it was like the Ultimate Guitar Handbook, and they have a section where they talk about the most important guitarists of all time.
Yeah,
and Sid Barrett and David Gilmour were both in there.
Yeah.
But Sid, talked about Sid Barrett, and so I was just really interested in his story, and then I went and listened to that Pink Floyd album, and that was the one that just really connected with me.
It really is a shame that what I was actually talking to somebody yesterday about them because I love Wish You Were Here. I think it's a great album, and just the song itself, I love that song. But like the whole story of that album and song and just him, like everything that happened to him, it's a shame that like that's all we got out of him was just that one album. You know, at least I think it was just that one album. He may have made some guest appearances on other songs, but largely speaking, just that album. And it's very unique, especially it's unique now, but especially for the time, you know, it's a great album. So,
and as I recall from the book, David Gilmour was the one who actually like taught him to play guitar.
Really?
Yeah. They were like friends. They were friends, and he picked up guitar, and David Gilmour was his like teacher. And then he started, you know, Pink Floyd. And then after he dropped out, David Gilmour stepped in and took over.
Wow. I didn't know that. All right. So you're a Piper.
I'm a Piper guy.
Okay. All right. I respect it. Who, in your opinion, would win in a pogo stick race? John, Ringo, Paul, or George?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Paul just because he's the most lighthearted and bouncy and energetic of the four.
I think I know the answer to this, but hot coffee or iced coffee?
Hot, yeah.
I assume. For those listening, we have both been drinking hot coffee throughout this episode, so I kind of had a clue to that answer.
Trying to avoid the slurps,
no,
right?
Fine. Who would win in a dance competition, Kenny G or Lady Gaga?
Lady Gaga, no doubt.
70s, 80s, or 90s?
80s for me,
Nice.
yeah.
Guacamole or salsa?
Salsa.
Waffles or pancakes?
Waffles.
Michael Jackson or Prince?
Michael Jackson.
Would you rather ride roller skates or unicycle everywhere you went?
Roller skates, yeah.
Are Crocs fashionable? Yes or no?
Just do you, man. That's the same with socks and sandals. Just like, you know, like I'm not, I wouldn't wear them, but I don't really care about fashion that much.
So you're leaning more towards the yes. You're not a defender.
Yeah. Like I like to make fun of Crocs, but at the same time, like it's all in good fun and like, you know, I want people to be happy, and if Crocs make you happy, then that's cool.
Okay, I respect it. I've heard some hot takes like no Crocs. I mean, so I respect it. Let's see, crunchy or creamy peanut butter?
Creamy, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does ranch belong on spaghetti? Yes or no?
No way.
I'm a staunch ranch on spaghetti fan.
I've never heard of that. My wife loves ranch on pizza. See, I ate ranch on some salmon last night, so I'm not that like.
See, this is a whole other conversation.
I'm not above reproach.
And I've had it with so many people, and there's gonna be people listening to this that I've had this conversation with. But like everyone I've talked to, they've never had it on spaghetti before, and I'm telling you, it is. If you like it on pizza, you will like it on spaghetti.
I don't like it on pizza, so I guess it's gonna be a no for me.
That's fair. If you don't like it on pizza, whatever. But I've heard people they're like, yeah, I like it on pizza. I'm like, I'm telling you, you will like it on spaghetti. Just trust me. You gotta trust me. I can't remember how I tried it, but you gotta trust me on this. Okay, and then the 15th and final question. This is the one that I end all of the segments on, and I want to hear your rationale with this one. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? You can take a minute to think about this.
I think I would go with one horse-sized duck because one, that would be incredible to see. But two, you know, it'd just be like you only got it, like you can keep your eye on it the whole time. Yeah. You know, like you got 100 horses attacking you, little tiny horses, and they're just like coming from everywhere. Yeah. And you sort of just get like devoured by it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. That's
just
fair.
Pummeled to death.
Yeah.
That duck though, I would like to see that duck.
Ducks. See, the thing is,
I like ducks too. Ducks are just cool.
I like ducks,
cool.
but they're kind of like, I feel like they're kind of aggressive. You know, like you ever seen like they're a little like there's a little chaos to ducks. You know, so all right. Well, I thank you for answering my question. I know they were a little all over the place, but that's kind of how I like to do it. So, before we finish, again, thank you very much for chatting with me today. I know that specifically for Yellow Racket, you all are on Instagram, and there's all kinds of social media handles. I'll make sure if anybody's listening, you want to check out what Ben is doing over at Yellow Racket, I'll make sure to put those links in the description. So if you want to follow him on Instagram. I'm assuming you're all on like Facebook or Twitter or anything like that.
Yeah, and you'll find there's two accounts. There's one for our record label and there's one for the store. Okay. So give us a follow on both. We've got new music coming out on the label this year, and we're putting out our first vinyl release ever this fall. That's going to be distributed around the country. So check out your local record store for that. That's exciting. But I'll make sure. I know you all have a website and stuff where you can also order records. So if you want to check it out on the website, on social media, anything like that, I'll make sure to put
the links for that in the description. For you personally, are there any other links or anything you'd like anybody to know about that I can put in the description for you, or you think that's about it?
Nah, I mean, I have so many different accounts. Yeah, I've got, my band Telemonster, and I've got my own personal accounts, and I've got the record label in the store. So there's a million ways to find me online.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll make sure those some of those links are included down there. So if you're listening, you want to check out Ben, what he's got going on, check out Yellow Racket. It'll be down there. If you are living, or if you're not living in the Chattanooga area, I would highly recommend, if you're just wanting to go check out a new store, check out a new area, or if you're looking to purchase some records, then definitely, me personally, highly recommend Yellow Racket. It's a great place, great people, and you will not be disappointed. You can get some good coffee while you're there. But yeah, with all that being said, thank you again for chatting with me today. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, maybe we'll do it again in the future. Once you get that,
Yeah.
Is that album that you're putting out, is it your band, or is it just
No,
this
new vinyl release is by Momo, who is a Brazilian artist based in London now.
Nice.
So we've got his album coming out on vinyl this fall, and one of our other artists, El Rocco, we're doing a cassette release this fall as well. So
Nice.
yeah.
Cool. Well, after that, maybe we'll chat it up and see what that experience has been like for you.
Sounds good.
But yeah, thank you again, man, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I hope all the best for you in the future.
Thanks, Daniel. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it's been awesome. To everybody listening, thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will catch you all on the next episode of the podcast. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the podcast. As one final reminder, if you'd like to support the show, then don't forget to rate and review the show wherever you get your podcast, or share it with a friend. If you'd like to check out any links that were mentioned during the show, or follow the show or myself on social media, then feel free to head to the description of today's episode to find these links. As always, thank you again for checking out today's episode, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I will catch you all on the next episode of the podcast. See ya!